when my name's mentioned, there was just so many other names that were part of that time, you know, and I'm obviously honored by that. I tell people I'm still enjoying the longest honeymoon in history with a city. But I remember driving down to the stadium and the lake had frozen solid. You know, it like froze with waves and like froze, like the wave's gonna break and then nope, it's froze. You know, it's like, it's cold.
Hi everybody, welcome to Club 46, driven by Bridgestone. I'm Jim Donovan, thrilled to be joined by former Browns quarterback and NFL MVP Brian Sipe. It is great to see you back here in Cleveland, Brian, always.
I appreciate that very much, Jim. I got to tell you, I feel like I'm on a honeymoon every time I come back here. The fans have just been so great to me and my family, so great to be here.
Why do you think that is? Because I have to tell you, whether you're here or not here, you mention the name Brian Sipe around Cleveland, and a smile comes on everybody's faces. You represent a guy that people really connected with here, and certainly your team, those Cardiac Kids. That's a very, very special moment to a lot of fans.
Well, I think that smile is just is a homage to all the great guys that I played with. That huddle that I went into every series in the stadium back then, those guys are still remain some of my very best friends to this day. Robert Jackson's my son's godfather, and it was just a special group of guys at a special, I think at a special time in Cleveland's history too. I think that had a lot to do with why we've been embraced so much, because I was drafted in 1972, and I remember taking that first drive. Back then the NFL draft was in February, so right afterwards they brought all the draft choices in, even the 13th rounders, which was the round I was taken in. And I'll never forget that drive up 71 from the airport. And if those of you that are old enough remember, Cleveland was a mess. Cleveland was a mess.
It was.
The flats, the steel mills were shut down. The town was struggling, just even clearing snow off the roads, and it was a year after the river caught fire. So I think the town was struggling for an identity, needed something good to happen. The football team was pretty good in '72, but we went dark for a little while.
Yeah.
And then when we finally came out of when we started to come out of that, and really in '76, the first year I started, we went 9-5, and then we started really putting the pieces together, and the town just went wild.
Do you have a lot of great memories, Cleveland teammates with the Browns?
Sure, yeah. The Cardiac Kids really started in '79. Everybody celebrates the 1980 season. In '79, the Browns hadn't been on Monday Night Football. There hadn't been a Monday Night Football game in Cleveland since the very first Monday Night Football game when the Browns played the Jets. And that was 10 years earlier.
Wow.
So we're 2-0 going into the third game of the season against the Dallas Cowboys, who are 2-0.
You're looking at a live shot of Cleveland Stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. There is an air of anticipation, of electricity, as two of the NFL's unbeatens go against each other tonight. An anticipated crowd of 80,000 plus.
In the whole history of the National Football League, you know what team has the winningest record? The Cleveland Browns.
That's right.
They got a tradition in this place, I'm telling you.
And this town lit up. I mean, lit up. There were banners hanging out of windows, apartment windows, and the crowds down at practice at Berea, just straining to look through the fence. And everybody was just so excited about that game. And I'll never forget that. We came out and we smoked them too. We smoked them. That was fun. For me personally, it was a big night. My father was terminally ill with cancer. I knew it was going to be the last game he would ever see. And my family had brought him back for that game. I remember walking out for the coin toss and shaking Roger Staubach's hand, going, wow, I'm in the bigs. I'm in the big leagues. So that's certainly that's a specific memory, but I have so many memories from my time here.
And you have lifelong friends
as
teammates here, right?
Oh, yeah. Robert Jackson, who I just was able to spend the last couple of hours down at practice, down at the training facility. Robert Jackson's and his wife Linda are dear friends. They're our son Nolan's godparents. We're always back. Their hospitality is second to none. Doug Deacon, of course, is a friend. Tom DeLeon was my roommate for 10 of the 12 years that I was here with Cleveland. Greg Pruitt, so many of the guys were just fantastic. Dave Logan, the whole offensive line.
All right, let's go back to growing up.
Yeah.
You're like every kid. It sounds like you played every sport. Football,
yeah.
baseball, basketball.
Sure.
You have a great story, though. You're on a Little League World Series championship team. Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Any kid that plays Little League Baseball, their dream is to go to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, be on Wide World of Sports.
Yeah.
Right? And you were.
It happened. And when you're 11 years old, and this is going back, it was 1961, so Little League was, every boy knew about Little League, right? There wasn't all these club teams in different sports.
No traveling teams or anything like
right.
that. Right.
There really was not a nationwide organized sports program other than Little League. And so I grew up wanting to have that ball cap, you know what I mean? And played in a Northern Little League, both El Cajon and La Mesa, outside of San Diego. The two cities both acclaimed us because boys came from both towns. But we were pretty darn good. I was the only 11-year-old, so I was kind of a youngster on the team. Everybody else was 12. I played catcher. I didn't have a big role on that team, to be honest with you. Had 3 pass balls in the 5th game and almost single-handedly lost it. Can't do that when you're a catcher.
No.
But yeah, we found our way back to Williamsport, Pennsylvania. This was not tournament play at the time. You lose and you're out. So we won 13 straight games to get back to Williamsport. There was a cover, as the old timers watching this will remember, Life magazine. There was a picture of our team in Life magazine hoisting, this was my claim to fame, hoisting our star player up on our shoulders, who had hit a walk-off home run in the championship game. So it just was wild. Met him at home plate, carried him off. I'm in the picture. I made it to Life magazine. I was fired up.
What was it like when you guys came home?
It was big
did they
time.
celebrate?
Oh, it was big time. Yeah, El Cajon had an airfield. It wasn't a commercial. It was like a private strip. But one of our coaches was a commercial airline pilot. And so he got permission. It used to be Western Airlines, became PSA Airlines, and I don't know it bought out after that. But he got permission to fly one of their planes into the El Cajon airport. And so there were fire engines down there and all kinds of people, and they put us on the fire engines and drove us through town. It was big stuff. It was, when you're a kid, for the longest time people would ask me what's my favorite sports memory. Well, when you're 11 and you do something like that, it's like the Super Bowl, it's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And one thing we used to love, all of us did this, when you played Little League back then, if you made it to the majors, you got these pins. And a green pin, if everybody wore Little League caps. If you had a green pin, it meant you were a major league player, meaning you played at the highest level of Little League, right? Mm-hmm. If you had, I think it was a light blue pin, it meant that or white pin, it meant that you made your league's all-star team. And then I think a pink one meant you won your first tournament. And then for each tournament you were in, you got a pin. Well, we look like 5-star generals. We'd wear our hats around. I never took that hat off, but every kid knew about pins, and they'd look at us and go, "What's that?" Of course, then we'd get to tell them what happened. That was big stuff. And I've been back to Williamsport, and it's just such a wonderful thing that they're still doing. It's a slice of Americana. The people are wonderful. The event, it's first class.
It really is. Tell me this: what made it football? Was it you just loved that more than the other sports, or?
Oh yeah, I could not wait to play football. Where I grew up, I think the reason that I was probably as successful as I was in sports is that we had 2 older boys in our neighborhood, Joel Clark and Pepper Kay. One day, Joel and Pepper had gotten together with a group of other boys that were outside of our neighborhood, and they'd started playing over at the local high school, Grossmont High School, and they were playing tackle football, and they'd all gotten pads and helmets. And I'll never forget, they needed some bodies, and they asked me if I would go, and I said, I don't have a helmet and shoulder pads. And they said, we'll get them for you. So I went over there, and that day I got my first taste of hit hard tackle football, and I said, this is what I want to do. So I think I was 10 years old at the time. When we were back in Williamsport, when we weren't practicing, we were talking about the fact that we were going to get home late for the start of the very first Pop Warner season in San Diego, and we were all fired up to get home, get our pads, and jump into that. So that was my entree into organized football, and that happened when I was 11.
Were you always a quarterback?
No. I always wanted to be a fullback, and that's the position I played because I just wanted to run the ball. And I got to Grossmont High School, so I got in a line with the fullbacks, and the line was too long, and they needed more offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. So they picked me out and said and made me a guard. And I was a guard for a day, and I said, this isn't working, because I knew I was a good enough athlete that I'd be better at a skill position. And so I snuck over to the wide receivers, and fortunately, the two quarterbacks who were fighting it out for the job, apparently our coach didn't think they were good enough, and he literally lined the team up and picked the three tallest guys, of which I was one, and said, you guys are trying out for quarterback. And that was my start. And so I said, okay. And I could throw. I naturally good at throwing. I used to love that throw down to second base. And won the starting job, and then I was a quarterback ever since.
How about in high school? Were you heavily recruited?
No.
As you went along? Were you winning state titles at Grossmont High School?
At the time, they didn't have a state, in California, they didn't have a state title. They had CIF, is the California Interscholastic Federation, broke the state up into like districts, and we would only play for those championships. No, we were very good. I started there as a junior, and I was okay. My senior year, I got really good. I was CIF Player of the Year, actually co-Player of the Year, and I thought, well, I guess I'm going to play in college, but I didn't hear from anybody, except Don Coryell at San Diego State.
Wow.
But
how did he come upon you?
Well, I was playing right under his nose, So, and Rod Dowhauer came out to school one day. He worked with me a little bit over the summer, and so they offered me a scholarship to go to San Diego State after my senior year when I was Player of the Year, and they offered me a scholarship. But Coryell was a very crafty guy. Back then, the freshmen weren't allowed to compete at the varsity level in college. And just like now, you had 5 years to complete 4 years of eligibility. But he had decided that he wasn't going to waste any scholarships on freshmen. He recruited all junior college transfers. So the entire team was made up of junior college transfers every year, and he was winning FCS national championships. I mean, we had the longest win streak in the country, and it was all junior college transfers. And so he offered me a scholarship when I was coming out of after my senior year at Grossmont High School, but he asked that I go to junior college for one semester, which I did. I went to Grossmont Junior College, which was in my neighborhood, played one season, and then transferred up for the spring, and then that's how I got started.
Tell me this. This is a story of
Okay.
a 13th round draft choice.
Yeah.
There aren't 13 rounds anymore.
Right.
Okay? I mean, there are 7, and a lot of times the 7th round draft choice
Right.
isn't around. You're a 13th round draft choice. I'm going to throw out a term that maybe a lot of young football fans never even heard of, a taxi squad player. How did you stay with it and make it all the way up to where you made it?
So that's really an easy question for me to answer because, first of all, I knew I was going to have trouble getting drafted because I wasn't very big. And back then it was when they first started going towards the big quarterbacks. The year before I was taken, the first 3 picks were Dan Pastorini, Jim Plunkett, and Archie Manning. All
Not
big,
bad.
big guys, and that was the Terry Bradshaw era. I was 6 foot, 185 pounds. And even though I led the nation in passing, I wasn't getting a lot of attention before the draft. There was some attention from the Dallas Cowboys. Someone thought that they might take me in the 5th round, but draft day rolled around. I didn't get called the first day, and the second day the Browns called, and to be quite honest, I'm sitting at the beach in San Diego, and my wife Jerry and I had to pull out a map to make sure we knew where Cleveland was, because never been back to this part of the country before.
So through the years, and before you actually got the job, right?
Yeah.
Do you give the Browns a lot of credit for sticking with you? Like, who was the big Brian Sipe fan? Because in today's NFL, you got to do it pretty quickly.
I'm glad you asked that question, because I need to mention Blanton Collier. And I remember looking around going, I think I can do this, but I don't know. You know what? I didn't know what to expect. And Blanton Collier pulled me aside one day and he said, Brian, I think you can play in this league. He said, when you go on the field, I got a feeling you're not coming right back off. And what he was saying is I was going to move the ball. You know what I mean? That's what we get paid to do, right? Move the ball, get close to the end zone, score some points.
Blanton Collier was right. Once you got on the field,
Yeah.
you weren't coming off.
Well, yeah, I love Blanton. Right guy at the right time.
Let's go to the Cardiac Kids.
Yeah,
They started out in 1980.
right.
And I know you said they started the Aura,
Right.
the year before. But in 80, the year, you start out 0-2.
Yeah.
Then, boom, these incredible, down to the last second
Yeah.
finishes started.
Yeah.
Take me through when it started, and did you guys just feel this level of invincibility late in the game that you could do it?
Jim, I think what really set us apart at that time is that the guys could get focused late in the game when they needed to be focused. That's not to say they weren't that way in the first half. Coaches get a little funny, teams get a little funny in the fourth quarter when they're protecting leads. And then we started forcing the action, you know what I mean? And you get them on their heels, and then suddenly it's just like, you know, it's like they're on roller skates and we're going downhill, you know. And I think the guys understood that if we just stayed focused, not every play is going to score a touchdown or even be a big game, but if we just stay focused, we're just going to keep taking what they give us, and somebody's going to make a big play. And sure enough, they would. Pruitt would break one, Reggie'd make a great catch, Ozzie would bust one up the middle, Logan would jump up over somebody and make a catch, you know. But we were just forcing the action. Now, the other thing that for me as a quarterback, and as far as the tactical side of it, I also knew that this was the advent of nickel defenses where they would put in additional defensive backs. And a lot of the staffs at that time they were pretty predictable about what they were going to be doing with their nickel defenses. And Sam Rutigliano was letting me call the plays. And so I knew if I pushed the action, and we even if we had an incomplete pass, we'd oftentimes go right to the line of scrimmage, because I knew that I was forcing them into a coverage that I'd seen the play before, and then I'd make a call at the line of scrimmage to take advantage of that coverage. And things have gotten a little more complicated since, but at that time, that was really an advantage that offenses had if they understood how to do it, and we did, and I think everybody on the team, especially in the huddle, they understood. It's our time. This is when we shine, you know, and we did.
And that's so important, because, you know, you can measure, a lot of times a quarterback is measured arm strength, you know, ability to, you know, get rid of the ball quickly. You hear about all this now. But there is that category that general managers, head coaches, coordinators look for. Can that guy, that quarterback, go into that huddle, last drive of the game, gotta have it, this is it.
Yeah.
And apparently you had it. You could go in that huddle and say, okay, we're going, huh? No nervousness at all?
Lots of nerves before games. Lots of nerves. And some nervousness then, you know, knowing that it's now or never, you know, but I think anybody that's good that plays at that level figures out how to get into a zone or a routine. You know, this is what I have to do. For me, because I was calling the plays, you know, I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking for if there's going to be any substitutions, you know, and my brain's working too hard, you know, to be nervous. Truthfully, to be nervous. Jerry will tell you after the games, I used to have horrible headaches. And I think it was just from 3 hours, but especially at the end of the game, just so intensely focused and just grinding, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I can't explain what you're asking me to explain. I was just doing my job, and the guys were just doing their job. And I would just remind them, you got a job to do. Do your job. Everybody just do their job, and something big's going to happen here. We just keep doing your job, and that's what we did.
Was there one of those comebacks that was your favorite? A lot of people talk about the Packer game at the old stadium. I mean, you're talking 80, 81, 82,000 people in those days. Yeah. And you get the ball to Logan.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty amazing one. And great Gibb Shanley call of the touchdown. Wow. I mean, that's a treasure.
That was really special. I think my favorite game is we beat. We had a late win. We had to score twice late to beat the Miami Dolphins. And I had a lot of respect for certain people. You know, like when I got to play against Roger Staubach, but Don Shula was on the sidelines. They had us beat. We were down by a couple of touchdowns, and I'll never forget. Because I was looking at the sidelines, and he was trying to make substitutions, and I knew by what substitution he was making, I'd figured out what coverage they were going to run. So I would just sit in the huddle and wait for him to send his guy on the field before I'd call a play. And at one point, we would be looking at each other. I'd be looking at him. I'm looking at the play clock, because at some point I knew what I wanted to call if he didn't send somebody on the field. And so we were playing this cat and mouse game, and we were driving, and he couldn't, and I had him. I knew exactly what we were going to do. And at one point, Shula took his clipboard, and he was looking at me, took his clipboard and just slammed it on the ground like that. And I went, bam! We got these guys, and we went down and scored. I think Reggie caught that one for the game winner.
80,000 plus cheering the Browns on. We're in sudden death.
Sudden death meant instant victory for Cleveland.
Deep to Rucker, he's open, touchdown! It's over! Reggie Rucker, pass from Sipe, he wins the ball game. A 39-yard pass give, and that's his 8th reception of the afternoon. The Browns have defeated the Miami Dolphins by a score of 30-24.
So during the 80 season, we beat the Houston Oilers.
Now you're coming home then.
Yeah,
you come back home.
We're down, right? We're down in Houston, and we beat the Oilers, and that put us solidly in position to win the division, which they hadn't won since I think '69 or something. And after we landed, we were taxiing, and the pilot came over the intercom and said that they had to make that there was going to be some special arrangement made for us because there was a problem at the terminal. Well, when we taxied around where the jetway is, when we taxied around, all we saw were faces in the terminal smashed up against the windows. They were smashed up because the people behind them were pushing, and we couldn't believe it. We're taxiing in like this and looking at and going, oh my gosh, what's going on? So it turns out that this was before TSA.
Yeah.
So you could go down to the gates, and people would go down the gates and meet people. Well, the Browns fans decided to meet the Cardiac Kids, and they created such a security nightmare that they had to close all the gates because the fans had overwhelmed that end of the terminal. So we sat in the plane while they said they were going to make some security arrangements. Well, there was no way we were going to walk up the jetway and out into this crowd. Right. So next to the jetways, there's a like service stairs, right? So we were going to go up the jetway, and they were going to push the crowd back so we could hang a U-turn and go down the jetway service stairs. And so I was sitting up in front. Tom DeLeon, my roommate, was very superstitious, and they used to let the oldest guys sit up in the front of the jet, which I thought was really big of Art Modell, because they sat in the back. It was pretty cool. The owner and everybody else was in the back. They let the players have the front. So Tom and I were right on the bulkhead, and sitting across from us was Lyle Alzado and somebody else. So they tell us, okay, here's what we're going to do. You guys we get on the jetway. We're going to push everybody back, blah, blah. We're going to do this thing, right? Well, if you remember Lyle Alzado, he was a pretty colorful guy. Besides being a good football player, he was a fans player, loved crowds. And I remember, so I'm first off the plane with Tom, right? We turn the corner and I look up there and all I see are screaming fans and security guys trying to push the fans back like this. And I said, Tom, we ain't getting out of here. Just then, Lyle Alzado bolts by us. He runs up the jetway and does a mosh dive pit out into the crowd. Just the whole place just erupts. It goes crazy. We all ran up the jetway and got down because they were all dealing with Alzado, who was being carried off to God knows where by the fans. So that was pretty priceless. So we ended up going down and getting on buses, and they bused us back to Berea, where we would leave our cars.
You're going to play the Raiders.
Yeah.
Was it cold all week before the
Yeah.
game? Did you know it was going to be that cold for the game?
I don't know that anybody was predicting that it was going to be as cold as it was, but I remember driving down to the stadium and the lake had frozen solid. You know, it like froze with waves and like froze. Like the wave's going to break and then no, it's froze. You know, it's like, it's cold. The field was so bad, water had percolated up from the ground and frozen in these like mushrooms, you know, all over the field you could see them, you know, and in between them there was dirt and you could get traction, but if you were trying to do something on one of these spots, it was like a skating rink. So it's bitter cold that way, dealing with that field in that condition. The wind was howling, and when the wind blew in that stadium, if you remember, it swirled.
Yes.
And we missed 2 field goals and an extra point. Now, how did that go? I can't remember. But the point is that it was hard to kick, and especially down at the open end of the field. So we have time for one last drive. We drive the length of the field. We're in front of the goalpost. We're down by 1 point. It's time to kick and go home. And we called timeout, went over and talked about it at the sidelines, and Sam wanted to try and throw one more time. And I understood why he wanted to, because we were really it was really a struggle to kick at that end. Our holder had trouble. He dropped one snap because his hands were too cold. It was a mess. And so Sam made, you know, we talked about what we were going to do. Personally, I thought my job was done. You know, let's let Mike Pruitt try and do it, you know. But Sam thought we should try and throw it. And I've told people, I clearly caused that problem. But I always appreciated that Sam thought that the best chance to win was to let me throw the ball one more time. So we ran it. He called Red Right 88, or we talked about what we would throw down there. Red Right 88. It was a series of crossing routes. And Ozzie in the slot here, if the safety came down, he was going to if they blitzed, he was going to dip over the top of it instead of running a crossing route, and I'd throw him in the back of the end zone. Sam wanted me to hit Logan going across the other way, which is what I was prepared to do. But when the safety came down, that's what we had done all season long. And I put a ball up in the air that just fluttered. You know, I had a shot. Ozzie was open, and I put a ball up into that wind, and it just fluttered and fell right in Mike Davis's hands, which he's still very grateful for, by the way, Mike Davis. When I run into him, yeah, that was brutal. So you probably want to ask me more about the play. That's about all that there is to that story. It was a play we were very familiar with. I reacted how I'd reacted all year, and I threw a ball that just didn't spiral into that wind. And Ozzie would have caught it if I'd thrown it correctly. The interesting thing about that story and why it's such a part of the Cardiac Kids, I owe this to a sports writer in New York, because 2 days later I was to go to the New York Athletic Club and be awarded the NFL Player of the Year. And I was not in the mood for it. it was just, you know, the way it ended, it was just too heartbreaking. You know, I didn't want to go to New York and get in front of that sea of media and have to just regurgitate this whole thing, but that's what you do, right?
Right.
So I went there and did what I needed to do, and when the day was over with, as everybody's kind of packing up to leave, one of the reporters came up to me and he said something to me that was really almost life-changing. He said, Brian, he said, you watch, over time, the way that season ended is going to be very special to the people in Cleveland and to your teammates. And I looked at him like, you gotta be kidding me, I don't want to hear this. He was absolutely right. I'm not a psychologist, you know, I don't know how that works, but that seared that season into everybody's head. You know what I mean? Nobody will ever forget that season. There was such excitement about that, and it came so close. You know, I don't think there's anybody that was alive at that time in Cleveland doesn't remember exactly where they were when that happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to this day, I'm amazed that, you know, I travel places and it'll be found out that I played NFL. Oh, you played for the Browns. Did you know the Cardiac Kids? You were part of the Cardiac Kids? Well, I think it was because of that, of the drama of that.
First Browns fans to sign our banner.
You know where this is going? This is going in the stadium for the last home game. You gonna miss me, bud?
Yeah.
I really compliment you and Jerry Shirk. When we were paralyzed here by the moving of the team,
Oh.
and it obviously hit the two of you, and it hit everybody, I think there was ever a Cleveland Brown. But the two of you did a very unique thing. You did that documentary.
Yeah.
Where you like traveled across the country.
Yeah.
Destination Cleveland.
Right.
Because I remember you editing it in our studios, in our television station. Can you tell me about that? I mean, it was an amazing project to take on.
It was, and it was so much fun. So to set this thing up, Modell is making noise about, you know, the team leaving.
Yeah.
Actually, he wasn't making noise. There was a lot of speculation. He was kind of mum about it. But he was trying to get a stadium. He couldn't get the city fathers to move on that deal. He had just negotiated the expansion, deals. So he knows what cities are willing to spend for a stadium. So Jerry Shirk and I, at the prodding of my dear friend Robert Jackson, the legend, NFL legend, who's out visiting us, is saying, you guys got to do something. The fans love you. You got to do something. The team's leaving. Well, we kind of figured out that Modell was going to leave anyway. But the fans, if you recall, really did a remarkable thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're just brainstorming one night. Well, what would we do? Robert, what would I do? You know, everybody knows you. Well, that's fine, but what would I do? Well, make a video. Okay, how would we make a video? You know, and so then Shirk and I were, you know, just playing mind games and go, well, what if we just got in a motorhome and drove across country to the last Browns game? And at the time, nobody was saying it was the last Browns game, but we were pretty convinced it would be. And so Robert says, I can get it, if you do that, I can get it financed. I know people, So Robert, sure enough, had some great connections in Cleveland. Some people said, we'll give you whatever you need. So we put together a film crew. An old teammate of mine at San Diego State had a film crew. He was doing some reality TV shows, and they jumped on board with this, with Jerry and I, onto a motorhome with a couple of cell phones and no script. Yeah. And we started calling. We would just look up Browns backers, you know, because there's Browns backers organization. So we go, well, how far are we going now? Well, we got a late start. We'll stop in Yuma. So we would call some Browns backers. Is there a Browns backers in Yuma? Yeah, there's Browns backers in Yuma. You know, call this guy. So we'd arrive in Yuma, and the fans would be there cheering, wearing all their brown and orange, and we'd have an impromptu pep rally. And we just did this all the way across the country, and by the time we got to Cleveland, we had visited with a lot of remarkable people, and by then we were making phone calls to former Browns You know, Jim Brown sat down with us. A number of greats sat down, did that. And then we had unprecedented access to the last game. I think that everybody was, Modell was gone by then.
Yes.
Things were dark, you know, and we probably got more access than the NFL wanted us to have, but our film crews could go everywhere, and that footage is pretty priceless of that last game.
Really
In fact, it's been used in some other, for some other projects, you know, some of the film that we took. But that was very touching, you know.
It really was.
And you were working at the station at the time. You saw us while we were in there editing. I'm sure you saw it. And that last game was one for the ages. I mean, to watch those fans, the reactions that they had, the tears and the anger and, you know, just the whole thing. And it was kind of surreal for Jerry and I to be there like we're television people,
Right.
you know, trying to, what do we do now? Where do we go now and do all
Players
this?
were sad.
Oh, everybody was
You know,
sad. That was
they were caught in the middle.
caught in the middle.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
You coached.
Yeah.
Did you like it? Do you like coaching? You coached high school, and then you went to San Diego State.
Yeah.
Did you like coaching?
I liked parts of it.
The winning?
Yeah. Well, I tell people I left the best coaching job in the world to go coach at San Diego State for a while, which was great. But you know, my kids were at a small private school, Santa Fe Christian. The coach and the athletic director kind of introduced themselves to me and asked if I could help. And I said, well, I'm not a coach. I don't, you know, whatever. I'll come out and talk to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I went out and talked to the kids, and they said, well, would you come back next week and talk to the kids? And I go, well, if it'll help, I'll come talk to your quarterbacks. Well, next thing I know, I got a whistle around my neck. and the head coach is quitting. And they asked me if I would be the head coach. And so I said yes. With no experience, but I knew that I had enough name recognition that I could get people's attention.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And so I did. I was able to round up some really good coaches who were willing to take a chance at this little program, and we just had tremendous success. I ended up doing that for 8 years, and then Brady Hoke, who's an Ohio guy, he would come by the school while I was coaching. I didn't have any D1 players, but this coach from Michigan kept showing up. He was on Bo Schembechler's staff before he went back.
All right.
After Ball State, San Diego State went back as the head coach. I go, from Michigan? So I went down there, and it was Brady. And he did this a couple of times, and I realized I think he just wanted to talk to a Cleveland Brown, you know, one of the old Browns guys. So anyway, he ends up getting the job at San Diego State and asked me to coach the quarterback. So I went there, thought I'd do it for a couple of years. 6 years later, I woke up and said, okay, I'm going to pay more attention to my grandkids now, you know. But no, I'm not a coach. I'm not a coach. I realized I love the game. I loved coaching at the high school level. My son-in-law coaches at Torrey Pines High School, one of the more powerhouse programs in the San Diego area, and I spent the last 2 years coaching their quarterbacks, which was fun. I love being on the field during practices. Love being on the field during practices. I'll say something. Guys, last thing I wanted to hear after a hard practice was something from an old-timer, okay? So I'm going to keep this short. I enjoyed watching you work.
Anytime you guys are in town, I would expect that you guys would come by.
Okay.
So,
I'm going to take that as an open invitation.
please.
Yeah.
Any lip service.
I got to tell you, I'm just so fired up that you got Ryan Lindley in there. I was just talking to Baker about pass pro.
Yeah,
He said there was nobody better ever at San Diego State. You were than you.
with protection.
Yeah. They stopped blitzing you.
Well, if you stop them, they don't come, right?
Well, if you stop them,
Or if you get the ball out.
yeah, but if you can stop them, you know what's going on behind it, right?
Yeah.
It gets easier.
They're always you're compromised if you stop them.
Yeah.
So tell me about Ryan Lindley.
So I get to San Diego State, and Ryan was going into his sophomore season, and he was clearly the best quarterback at San Diego State at the time. And he remembered that I had been coaching at Santa Fe Christian. We were a little bitty school taking swings at the big boys. He was one of the big boys, and we had his team down 28-7 at half. Everybody was in shock that we were doing this to Lindley's powerhouse team. Well, he came out in the second half and threw 5 touchdown passes. Yeah, and so obviously he remembered the game and everything, so kumbaya, hey, and now I'm your coach. And so I got to coach Ryan for 3 years at San Diego State. I just think he's a really special guy. I think that I'm just so tickled that he and Baker Mayfield are together. Ryan had a NFL career. He never established himself as a starter, but the reason he was there is he was such an astute quarterback and such a great leader and such a charismatic guy. And he ended up training quarterbacks after he graduated, or after he left the NFL. He trained quarterbacks for the combines, so he knew the NFL game. And the fact that he ended up here is just ironic. I mean, how does that happen? He's my favorite quarterback in the whole world. Now he's coaching the Cleveland Browns quarterback.
A lot of responsibility.
A lot of responsibility. But he was drafted by the Cardinals, and Coach Kitchens was with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Knew Ryan, coached Ryan, brought Ryan back from the Chargers when the 2 Cardinals quarterbacks went down before, and they'd already earned a playoff spot rather than play their rookie. They traded it for Ryan to get him back so that he could quarterback that game. So just a tremendous guy. Baker's really lucky to have him.
Tell me this, are you at all surprised the quarterback position and how all-encompassing it has become to be great at it? And you're talking about guys that live it every day,
Yeah.
conditioning their body,
Yeah.
just trying to stay in the game, trying to get better.
Yeah.
There's no off season for them.
Yeah.
And really, it's almost like if they're going to be great, they have to subscribe to that.
It seems like it. Yeah, it seems like it. I certainly can't relate to it. That's not how it was when we played. We would all scatter in the off season and kind of do our own workout programs. And Bill Tessendorf, our head trainer, of course with Leo Murphy, but Leo wouldn't travel. But Bill would come out and visit the cities and see, okay, where are you working out? What are you doing? Oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, but certainly not like it is now. Some of it is resources. These guys. If you got a chance to be a quarterback in the NFL, you got enough money to pay an entourage of people to train you. Do you know what I mean? And a facility to be specialized. I was out in the backyard with a net. I was throwing into a net because I couldn't get receivers to want to come run routes. Or
These guys have camps. They get together.
Oh yeah, I used
Before
to
training
make
camp.
Jerry go out and catch. We were on vacation in Hawaii once. I took the ball because we were going to go to training camp afterwards, and I said, Jerry, I got to throw today. And so she's catching. One went right through her hands and hit her right in the nose, bloody nose. Jerry was not my target anymore.
It's been amazing talking to you. You are revered. That is a very special thing. A California guy, a California kid comes to the Midwest and really captures the heart of the city. That's a pretty neat thing, and that your name continues to be, as I said to you before, you really bring, the name Sipe brings a smile.
Well, I think that that's because when my name's mentioned, there was just so many other names that were part of that time, and I'm obviously honored by that. I tell people I'm still enjoying the longest honeymoon in history with a city. I'm just amazed at how well we're treated and very grateful at this point in my life.
Brian, thanks very much for joining us. A great visit. Thank you for joining us. And join us again next week for a Club 46 interview driven by Bridgestone. We go down memory lane once again with another memorable Browns player.